Thank you very much, Dennis, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Bon après-midi. Messieurs, dames, je pense qu'il y a des francophones ici aujourd'hui. Il y en a quelques-uns. Before I begin my formal remarks, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the, frankly, extraordinarily heartbreaking events that unfolded last week here in British Columbia. These kinds of acts of violence shake communities to their core. They leave our families grieving, they leave neighbors searching for answers, and an entire country carrying a crushing weight. In fact, last week at the NATO meeting, 31 other member states, 31 consecutive states, asked me to pass on their condolences to you. So this is a global story, a heartbreaking one. Our thoughts, of course, are with the victims, their loved ones, and the community of Tumbler Ridge. This is a really hard time. Moments like these also tell us just how deeply connected we actually are. How important it is that we support one another, not only in times of crisis, but in the work that we do every day to build strong, resilient communities. That same commitment to supporting Canadians is what brings us here together today, I think. Across Canada, businesses large and small play an essential role in ensuring that our armed forces have what they need to carry out the very demanding and important jobs that we ask of them. That includes the equipment, the infrastructure, the innovative technologies that directly contribute to their success at home and abroad. This is about a lethal fighting force. But it also includes items that are less visible. Not all procurements are front-page newspaper procurements. Everything from shoelaces to backpacks to fuel for our vehicle fleets to generators to Wi-Fi on our bases. In fact, it might surprise some of you to know that more than half of Canada's defence spending, around 60%, goes towards investments like these, outside of the traditional defense industry sectors like aerospace or shipbuilding. So for those of you who contribute to the Canadian Armed Forces directly and indirectly, in ways that are top of mind or ways that are thought of less readily, I want to recognize how valuable your work is. From the two-person startups working out of their garages, to the large multinationals that employ thousands of Canadians, everything you do makes a difference, and we are rebuilding everything. All 33 bases, recruitment systems, healthcare, childcare, housing, prison system, justice system. I didn't know I had to run all those things when the Prime Minister asked me to take the job. But we are moving. We're moving quickly to rebuild all of this. Since becoming Minister of National Defence, it's been my priority to ensure our military has the right people and has the right capabilities to safeguard Canada in an increasingly uncertain world. As I said to a number of international news networks last weekend, in Munich, our geography no longer protects us. We're no longer isolated. The reach is now complete. And we are targeted like any other nation on the face of the earth. So that's why we've committed to rebuild, to rearm, and to reinvest in our forces. And this is on a scale that has not been seen in generations. And it's going to be done in close collaboration with our industry partners. This is backed by the planned investment of $81.8 billion, $81.8 billion towards defense over a 5-year period that we announced in Budget 2025. Crucially, through this funding, we're on track to meet our NATO 2% spending target by the end of this fiscal year, March 31st. And we're doing so a full 5, and some would say even 10 years before schedule. We're also building the foundation to move towards 5% of our GDP in line with our allies by 2035. That's a four-fold increase in defense spending between now and 2030. At the heart of these investments, number one, are military members and their families. That includes the more than 12,000 Canadian Armed Forces members who serve right here in British Columbia, with another 3,000 civilian employees and 1,400 members of the Coast Guard who have recently joined the defense family, transferred from the Department of Fisheries and Oceans into defense, 6,500 strong across the country. Our success as an institution and our safety as a country, well, it comes down to them, doesn't it? Last August, we implemented the first comprehensive pay increase for CAF members in nearly 3 decades. Members saw increases ranging from 8 to 10%, along with targeted allowances for in-demand trades and operational deployments. This was a long overdue change, I'm sure you would agree, an acknowledgement of the unique challenges of military life. Because here's the thing about serving in the military. You don't go on strike. There's no collective bargaining. There's no overtime. There's no mandatory compensatory time off. You do your job and you serve. And in the chain of command, when you're asked to do something, you do it. And our members are unbelievable because their expectation of being available is 24/7. The need to deploy across the globe, sometimes at a moment's notice, is commonplace. We do have 3,000 members of our forces in Latvia, an operation we've just renewed for 3 years. And their obligations to put Canada's security above their own safety. They do it. They do it with dedication. But our efforts don't stop there. We're also upgrading housing, as I mentioned, base infrastructure across the country, healthcare, employment for CAF members and their families. So you ask a family to relocate from Greenwood to Comox, but when they arrive in BC, it takes them sometimes a year to get a health card. That's not right. So we're working with all the premiers to make sure that they get the support they need. We meet them halfway, or more than halfway. At the end of the day, we need the right people with the right skills and training to bring their expertise to the military because, as I said, Canada's security rests on their shoulders. And we're making the necessary changes to ensure that anyone who wants to serve can build a career. Anyone. And I'm focused, very focused, on the continuing culture transformation inside the Canadian Armed Forces. Of course, we also need modern capabilities to take on the full spectrum of challenges we're facing in this challenging geopolitical moment. The Ukrainian war has been breathtaking in scope. We've learned a lot. We're not just participating in terms of training 57,000 members of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, but we are not only forward deployed in Latvia with 3,000 members of our forces, but we're learning a lot. We're watching carefully how the war is being prosecuted. As a result, in response to these new threats, we're delivering on a number of projects across the country. So we are buying River-class destroyers, many of them, and submarines, up to a dozen, to fighter jets and multi-mission aircraft. In fact, my staff tell me we have 148 aircraft on order today. From armored combat support vehicles to Arctic and offshore patrol vessels, we're strengthening our abilities in non-traditional domains as well, from space, which has arrived, to cyber. These investments are no longer optional. In today's volatile world, they are essential to our sovereignty, our security, and supporting our allies and our partners abroad. None of this is going to happen without you. None of this can happen without industry. Across Canada, more than 600 companies operate directly in the defense space, in the sphere, including dozens right here in Vancouver, alongside thousands more that contribute indirectly. That includes, as we just heard, companies like C-SPAN, which is a partner in our national shipbuilding strategy launched some 15 years ago. That's relatively new. At the end of the Second World War, we had the 4th largest Navy fleet in the world and the 3rd largest Air Force fleet in the world. So we're rebuilding. They're also building joint support ships and several Canadian Coast Guard vessels. Small and medium-sized businesses like OSI Maritime Systems, I'm visiting this afternoon, down in Burnaby. Integrated navigation systems for those ships, as well as those being built in Quebec, on the East Coast, and in 26 partner countries. Seaspan, as we heard, employs 5,300 people between Victoria and Vancouver. But just as importantly, it sustains 11,000 jobs across the country. Irving employs 2,600 people full-time in Halifax, but just as importantly, employs 10,000 more people across the country. So this is about delivering needed military capabilities. Our investments in defense are also about driving prosperity. This is a new thing for Canada. I'm going to come back to this theme in a moment. But it's basically the integration of our defense capabilities, our needs, and our economic activity. It is not separate from our economy. It's a powerful engine within it. We often don't think, rarely think about military security and economic security as being linked, but the numbers are staggering. At last count, Canada's defense industry generated more than $14 billion in GDP, 81,000 full-time jobs, 200,000 part-time jobs, many of them highly skilled, export-oriented, and innovation-driven. These figures are only growing as we continue scaling up our defense spending. We have a marketplace, but you should see the global marketplace. The German government recently went back to Parliament and had to amend its own constitution to allow it to increase its GDP spending beyond 1%. And when the German government hits 5% by 2035, it's a number that is so large, the German authorities are wondering whether they can achieve the target. So investing in Canada's defensive capabilities also means investing in our prosperity, our ingenuity, and our skill. In short, what's going on is that we now recognize industrial capacity is national power. I like to say that a secure and sovereign country presupposes a secure and sovereign economy. And that's what Prime Minister Carney is driving forward with the plan that he's put in place that we're now executing on. This is one part of a larger plan. So we need to build our momentum now to help secure both industrial capacity and our national power. That was the impetus behind yesterday's announcement for the Defence Industrial Strategy. Many of you have been wondering what this is going to include, what it means for your companies, since well before yesterday's announcement. We first announced plans to develop Canada's defence this early last year, first ever. Since then, we've met with over 2,000 industry leaders and business leaders, 2,000. Internal partners, representatives from provincial and territorial governments, academics, the research universities, to ensure we were reflecting your perspectives. For the first time ever, we also sat down with some of Canada's top venture capital firms. Defence, armed forces, across the table from venture capitalists. Never been done. Furthermore, we met recently with 15 of the country's top bankers. Defence, Canadian Armed Forces, bankers. Never been done. To listen, to hear what we have to do to get this right. And we also took a long, deep dive into 17 countries. What have you done? What worked? What hasn't worked? What have you learnt? What do we need to be aware of? I recall the conversation I had with the Minister of Defence from Poland. I said, we're going to be doing a defence industrial strategy. You've just done one. What's your advice? He said, that's easy. You better go home and make a decision. I thought there was a translation problem. I don't know what he was talking about. What he was saying was, you need to decide what it is you want to do. You need to decide what it is you can do. You need to build on your strengths. They made a choice. Different kind of choice. Most of their companies are state-owned. A little different when you have that kind of command and control. But that was his best advice. But what we heard from those 17 countries and the companies and everybody else, industry strongly supports strengthening our military readiness. You want Canada to be a trusted defence partner internationally, and you're ready to step up. You also told us about the challenges. You need clearer, more predictable processes. You need more strategic focus on sovereign capabilities in critical sectors. Now, those are words that are big. Sovereign capabilities. When I first heard them, I asked the question of my staff, what does this have to do with King Charles? I didn't understand what a sovereign capability was. And in plain English, it's basically, what do we need? And what can we do? What are our needs? What does the Canadian Armed Forces require to acquit itself of its responsibilities well? So you need more focus on those areas, including AI, quantum, advanced materials, and aerospace. You need better access to capital. And you need stronger pathways into global markets. The strategy reflects all of these concerns, all these conversations. It wasn't written in Ottawa. It wasn't written on the 16th floor of my building at the NDHQ headquarters. It was written by many of you across the country. So we've broken it down into 5 components, or pillars, each about our ability to equip, sustain, and modernize our military, fostering a Canadian defence industry, allowing us to meet the 21st century challenges. 1, renewing our relationship with you in industry, maybe even beginning a relationship with you in industry. 2, buying strategically through a build, partner, buy framework. I'll come back to that. Build, partner, buy. 3, investing purposefully to strengthen an innovative Canadian defence sector. 4, securing supply chains for key inputs and goods. And 5, working with domestic partners, including in Canada's north and our Arctic, where we are investing massively. Our NORAD modernization alone is $40 billion. In October, we also set up a new Defence Investment Agency. You might have heard about this. And this is going to play a lead role in implementing these 5 pillars. Basically, we're reforming procurement from top to bottom. We're creating a special operating agency. It will be spun off. It will be professionalized. We will be taking experts from different parts of the federal ecosystem now, and we will be telling, as the single customer, D&D and CAF will be transmitting its needs to the procurement agency, and their job will be to professionally acquire. That's how it works at the Vancouver General. That's how it works in the Ottawa Hospital, and that's how we're going to do it with this system, which is why Doug Guzman, the new president and CEO, who we took from the Royal Bank of Canada in downtown Toronto as number 2, I think he was, is now seized with negotiations with both the Koreans and the German-Norwegian team for submarines. That will be his responsibility. Doug, this is what we require. Now please go execute your responsibilities over here and streamline procurement. So that is continuing as we stood it up. We're also ensuring we're shoring up our most important capabilities, these sovereign capabilities, as I called them, from aerospace and digital systems to specialized manufacturing and ammunition. These are the capabilities CAF members need to ensure our safety and sovereignty. We're creating new avenues for investment and export of Canadian goods. So here's what we did. We lifted all the restrictions on the Business Development Bank of Canada, our state-owned public purpose bank, and we lifted the same restrictions at Export Development Canada, investing in defence. So up to 4 months ago, neither of them were allowed to play in the defence space. That's no longer the case. And since then, the president and CEO of EDC had disclosed to me in a meeting recently that they have already financed about $800 million worth of deals abroad. All of our trade commissioner practice is being instructed around the world and our military and defense attachés to become much more active in the defense space everywhere. So they will be carrying the message forward into the global marketplace. That's why I signed the new European Union agreement over the weekend to allow Canada, as the only non-European nation, not even the UK government was able to find its way in, to participate in 150 billion euros of lending, borrowing by European Union states who are then able to procure their materiel from Canada. It's a big breakthrough for Canada. We wanted to make sure we got there early, and we did. So that will be available to you. What else are we doing? A lot of the future is going to be about the most advanced research. Well, we haven't had a place in Canada, except for a few university labs, where there are SCIFs for businesses to be able to come together, working with our military folks, understand what their needs are, and conducting research together. With foreign direct investment, sovereign wealth funds, public money, private money, coming to play in one place. We call it Borealis, the Bureau of Research, Engineering and Advanced Leadership in Innovation and Science. It's a big priority for the Prime Minister and I. We put $68 million into it for 3 years to start it. Its job, coordinate and accelerate defense research and innovation. Where? Particularly in AI. This region is very strong in AI, quantum, cyber, so we get those sovereign capabilities up. As part of this Borealis, we're establishing a national network of defense, innovation, secure hubs, DISH, D-I-S-H, a DISH, a secure, mission-oriented site where government, industry, academia, not-for-profits can collaborate to address a big challenge in defense innovation. For those of you who know the US DARPA program and the remarkable technologies that have emerged from it over the past 70 years, you know the potential that exists in this kind of network. The first of the hubs already launched in Halifax about a month ago. It's the first in maritime security for the country. Each will be specialized. So you can imagine there are hundreds of applications coming from around the country, from universities, trade associations, defense sectors saying, we're very strong in these core areas. We welcome those applications, we'll process them, and in due course, these dishes will be opened across the country. Now, going back to build, partner, buy, what is that? This is the one that's going to be led by the new procurement agency. It's about, wherever possible, prioritizing buying made-in-Canada solutions and directing new defense procurements to Canadian firms in areas of homegrown strength. What do we do well? What can we buy right here? What can we make right here? When it makes sense to do so, Canada will partner with trusted allies and multinational firms to jointly deliver capabilities and create new commercial opportunities for Canadian firms. We have long-standing defensive partnerships across the globe, and we're pursuing new ones, particularly in Europe and the Indo-Pacific. We signed 12 new agreements in 6 months. I think 6 of those included a defense component. Just recently, a formalized agreement with the Japanese authorities, which allows for now the sharing of classified research, high-end research between Japan and Canada. I mentioned SAFE, an agreement that was signed just over the weekend. But if we can't build it, if we can't partner, then we're going to buy it. And if we do buy it, we're going to be doing it with strong conditions attached that spur reinvestment into the Canadian defense industrial base, making sure we retain sovereign control of what we're buying over newly acquired assets. This includes seeking investments through the ITB policy, the Industrial and Technological Benefits Policy, which we're also modernizing, by the way, because they have to be, to make sure we're getting the most value we can out of these procurements. That's what that means. build, partner, buy in that sequence. The new strategy represents a fundamental change in how we work with industry to equip the military. It was born out of necessity. It's how government and industry work together now is absolutely essential. I've spoken to about 10,000 members of the Canadian Armed Forces since becoming minister, maybe 15 town halls. And I explain this to the members of the Canadian Armed Forces, and it's for many folks who walk up to me and say, basically, what took you so long? We've known this for decades. So they're very pleased. And I think they feel, as a result of this new initiative, that we have their backs even more than we did previously. Jobs, opportunities, the tools our military needs, that's the groundwork for future success. Over the next 10 years, these are aspirational, but I am convinced we can do this. We're going to generate 125,000 good jobs across the country and increase total Canadian defence industry revenues by more than 220%. You can imagine in a community like Vancouver, with its world-class aerospace and maritime industry footprint, as I mentioned to you, where the CAF and D&D alone are the 5th largest employer in the province, where already we spend $835 million a year in terms of salaries, procurement, and infrastructure right here in BC. And I can tell you this, over the last several years and going forward for the next 6 years, D&D and CAF is spending $20 billion in BC. Not $2 billion, $20 billion. That's a lot of concrete. That's a lot of HVAC. That's a lot of engineering. That's a lot of supplies, lumber, labor, architecture, design, roofing, girders, construction. And we're doing that across our bases. We're doing that in Esquimalt in anticipation of our submarines. But that's on its way. That's not a plan. That's being executed. So it's going to be a very, very big investment for BC, as I mentioned to the Premier. Unless you have a larger project, sir, I think we are probably your largest investment right now for the next 4 or 5 years. And we are counting on all of you to help us execute on this. You know, one of the things I've learned over the years is there's no shortage of talent in this country. I've just come back from meeting with 40 or 50 countries, and they look at Canada and they say, you have it all. You have the space, you have the water, you have the steel, you have the aluminum and the lumber. And just as importantly, you got the brain power. You got the engineers, you got the entrepreneurs, you got financial risk takers. You folks you're not Luxembourg, you're not Poland, you're something different. And yes, we do live up beside the United States of America, a strong partner with whom we've been doing business for a long time, and we're going to continue to do business for a long time. But what we are doing is diversifying. We are building new relationships. And one of the things I heard, people looked at me and said, you're global leaders in aerospace, in communications technology, in shipbuilding, in advanced research. We're very seriously looking at you now for our next big investment. Big global companies, smaller companies. We can skate, and we can skate with anyone. Of that, I'm absolutely convinced. We're not starting from zero. We have the chance and the need to build on our successes. We intend to build the capabilities. We're going to build the partnerships so that our armed forces have what they need to defend Canadians, because the threat landscape has changed. Together we can create good jobs, economic opportunity from coast to coast to coast. Together we can ensure that Canada remains secure, sovereign, and prosperous. And I want to end with this. I want to thank you. Folks in business are rarely thanked. Thanked for your creativity, for your risk-taking, your partnership, and finally, your dedication to a project that we all call Canada. Thank you very much.
Just gets mic'd up, we'll just settle in. I'll just remind folks that they can log on to Slido to submit or vote for your own questions as well. I think everybody can see Slido on the screen there, and the pass code is defense. Minister, thank you for outlining the strategy. And Dennis, I think you said it really well. It is a bold strategy, which often, I don't think the words bold and government have often gone together, but this clearly is a new approach and a lot of bold goals set out over a period of time. Looking at the strategy over the last couple of days as well, you mentioned 125,000 jobs, increasing acquisitions awarded to Canadian firms, defense exports increasing. One of the things that also struck me was the sovereign capabilities. And I think in the strategy it lists about 10. And maybe one of the things that I'm hearing in some review and expertise comments about the strategy is a list of 10 might be too broad. So in that list of 10 of sovereign capabilities, are some higher priority than others?
The list was devised with considerable input from existing capacity in the Canadian economy. It's not a list of desired or like to haves or want to haves. It's very much a list of a frank, honest assessment of what we're capable of doing. The question we have to ask ourselves is, what do we need? What do our Canadian Armed Forces need to do their jobs? The second question you have to ask yourself is, what can we build here? What can we research? What can we lead on? Where are we leading? And the third question you have to ask yourself is, what can we sell or share abroad? Because the world wants more of our technology, it wants more of our know-how. So the assessment that was performed was one that was trying to encompass core areas. Now, the thing about launching a new strategy like this is, I come from a very large family, 10 siblings. And my mother used to say when you would balk when she gave you your chore list, she'd look at you and smile and say, the best way to start is to start. Just get to work. And I think with this strategy, what we're trying to do is start. We're not starting from zero, as I said. We've got 600 companies at least, lots of people aligned, ready to go. And so the narrowing it down to 10 was actually quite difficult. People thought it was possible having a longer list, and we thought, no, we wanted to go with the core capabilities that we assessed were out there, that we heard back from all the trade associations, from all the provincial governments, from national organizations, NGOs, research, the Economist Intelligence Unit. I mean, all these folks were consulted, and that's why we ended up with 10.
So looking across the room, I see business leaders across many sectors and industries, and British Columbia's got an incredible base of talent, whether we're talking in natural resources and AI and technology. So how does British Columbia best position itself to align with the federal priorities to leverage those dollars to ensure that we're not just suppliers and maybe part-time actors in this strategy, but really those long-term anchors?
Well, number one, I had a very, very good conversation with Premier Eby about this, and I have to commend the BC government for its concept paper for BC
Look West.
Look West. Mm-hmm. Very comprehensive. I'm sure it's got many of your fingerprints on it. Number two, I would begin tracking the procurements that are coming. It's important for you to understand, too, that of all the procurements that are going on, the Defence Investment Agency will be procuring goods and services that are over $100 million. Everything below $100 million will remain with our department. Well, we're going to try to make sure that the small firms, because 98% of the Canadian economy is 100 people or less, companies of 100 employees or less, We're going to try to make sure that there is availability and space to be able to enter into a portal through which you're going to be able to bid on these contracts. I think the other thing to do is remember, we're trying to give rise to additional anchor companies. I would say C-SPAN's an anchor company in our national shipbuilding strategy, as is Davie and Irving. We have others who want to join, which is great. But what we really want to see is a five-fold increase in anchor companies. What we really want to see is the 9-person radar company in Trois-Rivières, Quebec, who I visited 2 weeks ago, go from 9 to 25 employees. Or the young drone engineers from the University of Sherbrooke who just won $1 million ideas competition because they've got some very advanced technology they want to sell to the Pentagon. I want to see them go from 4 to 8 to 16 to 32. So the way for BC, well, first of all, BC is already involved. Your AI work will be critical. Your quantum work will be critical. Those high-end leadership science areas are going to be foundational. What you may or may not be doing in space, what you're doing on shipbuilding, that's going to be very important. It's interesting this morning meeting with the maybe 30 or 40 employees of the company, how when I explained to them they were an integral part of this journey, this project called Canada, I mean, they understood it completely. They understood that they weren't just shipbuilders. They understood that they were part and parcel of something larger. And I would say in BC, in Ontario, in Manitoba, across the country, let's make sure that everybody involved in this journey, that of everybody involved, no one is just a passenger. Everybody's a shareholder. This is how I think if we align things with labor, with management, with capital, with regulation, with risk-taking, this is what's going to set this thing going forward.
Before we started the event, I was talking to a couple of business leaders who were in Singapore last week. About 700 Canadian business leaders were there and heard very clearly that Canada has what the world wants and what the world needs, and wants it very quickly. So how, understanding what you're saying about the boldness and that Canada is moving quickly, Canada is disparate. And because we have many provinces and territories, how do you ensure that we're doing so in an orchestrated way to meet the moment internationally?
I mentioned earlier the notion that our Trade Commissioner practice is being instructed at Global Affairs Canada to become much more active in the defense space. That starts with the Prime Minister. Let me illustrate. I'm sitting across the table from the Minister of Defense in the Philippines, maybe 6 weeks ago. Looking at my staff, I think it's 6 weeks ago. And I'm really shameless, because before the meeting I asked my team to give me the list of contracts that were outstanding between Canadian companies and the Philippines. And so I graciously, as graciously as possible, slip across the table a list of 2 or 3 companies that were waiting for contractual decisions. We have to be that bold. The idea of a more coherent international outreach is exactly why the Prime Minister has been leading 12 global missions. That's how he was able to come back from the United Arab Emirates with $80 billion of investment money. That's why he's continuing to reach out to sovereign wealth funds. That's why we are looking at foreign direct investment. That's why we are negotiating as much as we can on the submarine deal, for example, or on industrial benefits around fighter jets. But the coherence around that international marketplace is one we're turning our minds to. I just met with the Minister of Defense from Singapore on Saturday, and his eyes lit up like saucers when he learned about the strategy we were going to be delivering and the openness to doing business with Canada. And then he reminded me that they're very involved in the German sub-bid. And I said, okay, that's enough of that.
So this is going to require action, which government has tended in past to be more about process, and understanding that this is the focus for the Carney government. Some out-of-the-box thinking is required, and I do want to make sure that I address this top question, because this is some out-of-the-box thinking about a consideration for post-secondary institutions beyond skills development and utilizing their physical space for increased training capacity.
Yes. So one of the first things I insisted on doing was meeting with the presidents of the top 15 research universities. You know, we undersell our capacity, right? We really do. My brother was the former Premier of Ontario for 10 years, and he thought of himself as Premier Education. We just thought of him as our brother. But the point is, you start looking at the depth of talent in our university systems. There was a meeting at the University of Alberta, and you start looking at the comparative strengths. So Laval is very strong in road building in an Arctic context. With melting permafrost, we're expanding NORAD forward operating locations. We're building northern operating centers for our military. They're very strong in that area. UBC isn't. Right? Alberta is very strong in a particular form of quantum. So we've already met with the top 25 to 30 universities, and we've set in place now a formal mechanism through the DIS and the U15 research universities to feed back and forth what our needs are so we can help direct and align research. And as you probably know from the budget, we did earmark $1.6 billion for a talent acquisition strategy. So we're going to be very direct around the world, and we're going to help start attracting people into Canada and maybe their entire research lab. Maybe we're going to be able to take, 10 top researchers in a particular engineering sector out of Hamburg, Germany, or Liège, France, and bring them to Canada for 5 or 10 years, accelerate their PR status, get their security clearances, and stand up a lab for them to do the work that we need for our needs.
One of the ways that British Columbia has put up its hand to make sure that it is part of the strategy, I was honored to be part of a private sector group committee, the Vancouver Pacific Security Bid Committee, and a number of business leaders are in the room here. So this is in regards to the Defence Security and Resilience Bank. So Canada is a leading nation to be awarded this bank through negotiations that begin next month. And now the Prime Minister will need to decide if Canada is awarded the bank, could it be held, could it be hosted in Vancouver, Montreal, Toronto? A number of cities have put up their hands, including Vancouver. And speaking about geographical strengths, I mean, we feel very strongly that we are the strategic choice given a number of factors, including we are the tri-continental bridge to the EU, Asia Pacific, Arctic. We have a number of what the criteria is required here. So thinking about this from the Canadian perspective first, and then British Columbia, but how significant an opportunity is this for Canada to be chosen as the host for this bank?
So the idea of a defense and security resilience bank came from NATO. NATO has a series of investment funds, innovation funds, inherent in their structure. But there was a discussion about the need to create a World Bank-like structure, if you know what the World Bank is, owned by governments, capitalized by governments, which would minimize risk because governments can borrow. Sovereign borrowing is just cheaper, can pass on the savings. So that idea lay dormant for several years at NATO. And then a number of former NATO folks came together and said, it's time for us to deliver this thing. So they went out and created a concept. Canada got behind it early and quickly. The Prime Minister is very supportive. And I think at every single meeting I had in the last 4 or 5 days, I raised the DSRB. We're trying to get more and more and more nation states to join us on this journey, to create a larger fund. The Brits have talked about joining. They still have to get some things through their Chancellor of the Exchequer. Other countries, Singapore showed interest, Japan showed interest, so we're trying to take it from about 12 now to 30 or 40 nation states. Once that critical mass happens, Every Canadian chartered bank has signed on to support it. Canada will be in a really good position, I think, to say it's time to really give rise to this bank, create it, hopefully headquartered here in Canada, which I think we can do, and then it'll be a question about where to site it. Now, that being said, if you know anything about the World Bank, or any of the 4 or 5 regional development banks, like the Inter-American Development Bank or European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, they often have offices in other places. If this is successful, which I think it can be, I think it doesn't preclude having offices in multiple locations. For example, a North American office, a Latin American office, an Indo-Pacific office, a European, Central Eurasian office. You could end up with 3 or 4. I don't know. It's a question of taking it step by step. But we have certainly been pushing out the concept. I'll be writing to 30 or 40 ministers. In fact, I already did this week, at the beginning of the week, to say, hey, we're still interested. Are you interested? Would you like to join us?
And we only have a few minutes to talk for a long time. I think this is a topic that's of interest to many, many people. But maybe with some closing remarks about what I'm hearing from you about this new strategy and even about the decision around the DSRB of Canada's award of this bank is that in part there is a geographical lens being put on all of this. And so the message for British Columbia, for the leaders in the room around that the capabilities and the strengths when it comes to geography, what would you say to these folks in this room?
I would say go back and read the theory of comparative advantage. Where are you strongest? Where can you deliver the best product? How can you help us achieve our targets? We will be telegraphing more clearly, especially through our DISH and our research setups, our secure hubs, what we need. We've never done this before. We've never been in a position to share the details of our needs for the Canadian Armed Forces with industry. There's been no venue to do it. So I would say stay tuned. Wait for the procurements to start being made public. And I think you'll be very well positioned. I see this as a very national undertaking. I don't think, I can tell you, from my perspective, our government's perspective, it's not about one region over another on some subject, some area. Obviously, where comparative strengths lie, there will be an opportunity. But that doesn't mean we cannot expand. We have to make a decision. Things changed. It's not that we're no longer dancing with our closest neighbors and friends. It's just it's moved from a tango to a waltz. And we will continue dancing. But we need to make a concerted effort now to grow the economic pie. And that's exactly what we're doing. Defense will become, in the plan we have, one of 3 fundamental economic sectors for our future. And BC and the Lower Mainland and GVRD, this entire province, on critical minerals alone. When we start, we'll be stockpiling a lot of critical minerals for NATO, for ourselves. And we'll be doing that because we're also contending with China, which is vacuuming up as much critical minerals as it can find. And we need to do this for our future. We need it for our own materiel, and we need it for our own futures. BC has a lot. Turns out we have a lot of it. Mm-hmm. So I think that it's a question of positioning BC. Those discussions are already starting. Many companies in this room have already approached our teams. And I would urge you, when we get the final portal through which to enter, to look at your strengths, see how you can be of great help, join together, and don't be afraid to look outside of the country. I'm convinced we're going to be bringing in more foreign direct investment of a kind we haven't seen in some time. I sat across the table from CEOs of these astonishing companies, and their ask of me was, can you please facilitate a landing for our jet? We want to fly into Ottawa to meet the Prime Minister. So we have done something here, I think, and we've kind of woken up the middle powers, middle-sized countries have come together and said, what's happening isn't personal, it's business.
A country's made a decision to govern itself one way or another. That's fine. It's a sovereign country. It's doing what it wants to do. We're doing what we're going to want to do, which is to launch this kind of initiative. And I'm absolutely 100% convinced we can compete and we can win.
And I'm convinced that BC can compete
Absolutely.
and support the strategy. And one thing that we often talk about at our events is the need for British Columbia to be in Ottawa more often to make sure we stay on the radar and to be in discussions. So you will see a lot more business leaders in Ottawa in the coming weeks and months.
Love to see you, or invite me here. I'd love to come here.
Indeed. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, everybody. Appreciate it. Well done.